Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today we're here to talk about Web Center search that works, looking at how Mindbreeze InSpire can transform search in both Web Center content and portal. And I apologize, I'm getting over a cold, so my voice is a little scratchy. Hopefully you can understand me all right. What we're going to talk about today is what it means to create search that works. And then we're going to take a look at what is Mindbreeze InSpire Enterprise Search and how does Mindbreeze create search that works. And then we're going to look at how we integrate Mindbreeze with Oracle Web Center. And at the end of this session, I will open it up for questions. So feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box throughout the session, and we will take those at the end. So a little bit of background. My name is Kim Nygaard. I'm a product manager here at Fishbowl Solutions, and I've been working with Mindbreeze and search in general for a long time. I am a Mindbreeze certified expert and a GSA certified deployment specialist, and I've been part of Fishbowl's search team really since the beginning. Fishbowl is a Mindbreeze, Oracle, and Google partner. We've been working with enterprise search for about 7 years, and that really stemmed out of the work that we do in the content management space with Oracle Web Center, which we've been doing for about 18 years. And as many of you know, because I know a lot of you have worked with us on Google search implementations, we've been working with that project for a long time, and it's now been end of life, which we recently are excited to partner with Mindbreeze, and we have already 10 Mindbreeze certified experts on staff who have completed all of the training to be considered experts. So to start the conversation, we're going to talk about what does it mean when I say we're going to create search that works. What do I mean when I say that? So to do that, let's look at what happens when you search. So the search process is pretty straightforward, right? Everybody probably does multiple searches every day, both for personal and work purposes. And when you kind of break down what's actually happening, there's a few different things. First of all, a user enters a query. So someone types some words in a search box, or nowadays, in some cases, speaks the query. Secondly, the search engine needs to go out and take all the information that it has at its disposal and figure out which things match, and then order those in some kind of a meaningful, relevant way. And then the last thing that has to happen is those results need to get surfaced back up to a user so that they can consume them. So when we talk about search that works, that puts a particular spin on these 3 steps. So first of all, user enters a query. To have search that works, the search engine needs to understand the user's intent. So it's more than just exact words that you type in a box and finding here's all the documents that contain those words, right? So it's how do we understand the meaning, the context, what the user is actually looking for when they type some words in a query box. The second thing that needs to happen is the search engine needs to rank the results in an accurate and meaningful way. So it's not just here's everything that matches, but really figuring out, well, what should be on page 1? What should those first 5 or 10 results be? And ranking them in an accurate, relevant way. And then the third thing that needs to happen is that the search engine needs to provide rich context around those results when it displays them back to the user. So how does Web Center stack up? It's probably not much of a surprise out of the box that Web Center search doesn't work particularly well. That's probably why you joined this webcast. First of all, Web Center content doesn't really understand much about user intent. Out of the box, the query engine is extremely literal. So users need to know exactly how something got checked in order to be able to find it, because they have to use those exact same terms. Additionally, users need to know which metadata fields were used for which values. They have to know what field something is in order to be able to use metadata to enrich the search experience. So it's very literal. It requires a lot of knowledge on the part of the user to be able to find things. Secondly, as we look at ranking, Web Center content out of the box doesn't have much in terms of being able to put meaning around the ranking of the search results. So depending on which particular configuration you have, either Oracle text search or the standard database full text search, whether you're using Oracle or SQL Server. If you're using database full text search, there's no ranking whatsoever. So most of the time you're getting your results back in order of when they were checked in, which may not be in order that they're actually relevant to what you searched for. If you're using Oracle Text Search, you do have a very rudimentary score algorithm that it uses to look at how often keywords occur in the documents, but it's very simplistic. And what we find and hear from a lot of our customers is that, it feels kind of random. It feels like the things that are on page 1 aren't actually the most relevant content. And then the third piece is displaying the results with context. So the display is the part that customers may have the most control over. I know some of our customers have done minor to extensive customizations to WebCenter in order to try to change the way that it displays results, because out of the box there's not a lot of context. The snippet quality is kind of borderline. The ability to do things like filters and thumbnails and previews aren't necessarily there with the to meet what a user would expect as far as making it easy to look at the search results and know there's the document that I'm looking for. So obviously, probably none of this comes as a surprise, right? So that's the reason that Fishbowl really got into the enterprise search business to begin with about 7 years ago. And that's why we're really excited to partner with Mindbreeze, because Mindbreeze can create search that works. A little bit of background on Mindbreeze, what Mindbreeze is. Mindbreeze is an enterprise search appliance. So for those of you who are on the phone today who have a Google search appliance, you're already kind of familiar with this architecture. And like I mentioned, the Google search appliance has been end-of-life. Fishbowl has been, because when we got the message from Google that they were going to be end-of-lifing the appliance, we went out to the market and we looked at a dozen different technologies, and we chose Mindbreeze as the one that we feel like is the best. So we're really excited about what this technology can do, how it works with WebCenter, what it can bring to the table. Some of the things that stood out to us, particularly because it is another appliance, is it really is a product. It's an out-of-the-box. You buy it, you configure it, and you get on your way searching. It's not some of the other products on the market. They're more frameworks. You really have to build your own algorithms, build your own indexing pipeline, set up your own server farms. So the time to deployment is much longer. The effort that it takes to maintain that solution in-house or through a partner is much greater. So we really liked how easy to deploy Mindbreeze is. We also like that it's very scalable, which I will talk a little bit more about in a little bit. And then the security model is extremely flexible, which means that for WebCenter customers in particular, where WebCenter has a somewhat complex security model, or it can in certain scenarios, we needed a technology that could support that and could honor the complexity of security groups and accounts and roles and ACLs, and Mindbreeze is able to do that. So those were some of the reasons why Fishbowl feels like Mindbreeze is a great search product. We're excited to partner with them and bring this integration to WebCenter content. In addition to WebCenter, which is really the focus of this webinar, I did want to mention that because Mindbreeze is enterprise search, it's not only about making search work in WebCenter. For many of our customers, that's the first step, but you can also integrate Mindbreeze with other sources like SharePoint, file shares, databases. And so as I'm going through, talking about the different ways that Mindbreeze can create search that works in WebCenter, keep in mind that these same principles can also apply to any other data sources that you may want to integrate with Mindbreeze InSpire. So obviously Fishbowl did our research, and we were really happy with Mindbreeze. The analyst community has also recently, both Gartner and Forrester, released their new reports on the enterprise search market, which has kind of gone through some different names. Gartner is now calling it insight engines. Forrester now calls it cognitive search, knowledge discovery. But these are both kind of the space that used to be called, or is still called, enterprise search. So Gartner ranked Mindbreeze highest of all the vendors they evaluated in ability to execute. And ability to execute focuses on things like speed of deployment, being able to do the things that they say they were going to do, getting customers live and successful in a timely fashion. And then Forrester called Mindbreeze the king of search appliances, saying they were search's best kept secret in appliance form, and also commended them for the number of out-of-the-box connectors that they have for various data sources. Mindbreeze is has one of the biggest repertoires of out-of-the-box connectors to connect to different repositories. So like I said, Mindbreeze really is enterprise search. That's all that they do. You may or may not have heard of them prior to talking to Fishbowl or receiving this webinar invite, but they've actually been around since 2005. They have a very mature, stable product with over 1,000 customers. They've already replaced over 400 GSAs, and their largest installation has almost 2 billion documents. So that really speaks to the scalability of the platform. You can see a few of the customers that they have on the bottom of this slide. And as I mentioned, scalability, I did want to also share a couple of comments around how Mindbreeze can scale. So because of the appliance model, Mindbreeze scales by connecting multiple appliances together. And so if you're looking to scale for a large volume of content, you can distribute your index across multiple Mindbreeze appliances in order to support hundreds of millions or billions of documents. On the flip side, maybe you don't have a lot of documents, but you have extremely high query volume. You can also scale Mindbreeze for high availability by having either passive or active appliances in a hot failover configuration or an active configuration to be able to support extremely high query volumes for certain types of scenarios, such as maybe public web or highly visible search deployments. So with that, that gives you a little bit of an understanding of what Mindbreeze is at a high level, what it can do. What I want to do now is come back to that conversation of what does it mean to have search that works? How does Mindbreeze specifically do that? So the first thing we said was user enters a query in the search box, and a good search tool can provide a lot of context around that. So let's take a look at that. So Mindbreeze really is good at understanding user intent. So I have a hypothetical example here of a query and the kind of documents you could find without query expansion, and then how many more relevant results you could find with query expansion. And listed across the bottom are some of the different features that Mindbreeze has that work together to support rich query interpretation and understanding of intent. So the first, if we break this down a little bit, the first term we have is installing. So if we look at what happens when someone does a search, okay, they search for installing Oracle UCM. Well, you notice here, you can find the literal match without any query expansion. But by having query expansion, you can also find other variations of that word. And it's not just substrings, which you have with install, which is a substring of installing, but also completely different forms of the word, such as installation. And out of the box, based on the stemming that comes with Mindbreeze, it's going to have an understanding that different word parts carry the same meaning, and a user shouldn't have to know exactly how someone typed it in order to be able to find relevant content. If you look at the second term, Oracle has been misspelled. So if you notice in the first scenario, well, if someone else happened to check something in with the misspelling, then you can find it. And I see this a lot where, especially with large volumes of content, you may not realize that you misspelled a word because there's also a few documents, or in some cases, quite a few documents that also have those misspellings. But the reality is you're probably missing out on most of the content that actually contains relevant information. In the case of this example with Oracle, you could figure out, okay, I misspelled it, and you could correct the spelling error. In other scenarios where we're talking about proper nouns or more obscure words, you may not even know offhand what the correct spelling is. So by using a combination of spelling corrections, synonyms, and replacements, you can use the search. You can take that off of the user, and the search engine is able to figure out what did they really mean. What are some other terms that they probably were actually looking for? In the case of replacements, you can say, whenever someone searched for misspelled Oracle, actually search for properly spelled Oracle, things like that. And all of that you can do with Mindbreeze very quickly, easily, and out of the box. And then the last term we have here is UCM. So we probably all know Oracle WebCenter used to be called Oracle UCM. And when you look at this example, it highlights two things. One is legacy terminology versus new terminology. So you can use either synonyms or replacements to make that switch automatically in order to search for the correct terms. In addition, I know how much enterprise organizations love acronyms. By using query expansion, by using synonyms specifically, we can set the expanded term and the abbreviated term as equivalent, so users don't have to know which version to search on, And so content authors can freely use both terms and know that when users go to search for that content, they're going to find it in either scenario. So once we do that, obviously now we've created an even bigger list of content that matches the query. So it becomes even more important to be able to use relevancy well to determine, what shows up on page 1, not just here are the 90 or here are the 1,000 things that matched, but which ones matched best. And that's what relevancy algorithms are all about. I mentioned how WebCenter content doesn't really do this out of the box. Mindbreeze does this extremely well. So they're going to look at things like not only keyword density, which is how many times do the keywords occur in a document, relative to the overall number of words. They're going to look at proximity. Are the words close to one another or not? They're going to look at the structure of the document. So do the words appear in the title or the headings versus the body? They're going to look at freshness, which is how often or how long ago was this document created or updated, as well as boosting, which actually allows administrators to tune and tweak the algorithm. So out of the box, I found that it works very well. But in addition, if you have specific things in your organization, one of them that I see a lot is if you have a metadata field called keywords, where you have contributors who are actively curating a list of keywords that describe a document, well then you probably want to put extra weight on the contents of that metadata field, and boosting allows you to do that. And last, but definitely not least, Mindbreeze uses machine learning to monitor, track, and analyze the way that users interact with the search results, the documents they're clicking on, the documents they're viewing, previewing, the way that they're applying filters in order to automatically improve relevancy over time without any admin intervention. And then the last piece of the search experience is really how do we take the results and display those back to a user in a way that is contextual and meaningful and makes it really easy for them to find the one that's actually relevant to what they're looking for. So there's a number of ways that Mindbreeze does this. One is through highlighting keywords where they occur not only in the title, but in the snippet and in the full text of the preview, which is created by the search clients. Mindbreeze also provides metadata as part of the search UI, the ability to configure and select filters to refine your search, and you can drive these based on metadata, like in the case of WebCenter, which is specifically tagged on the content. You can also set up rules to extract metadata using entity recognition or parsing the contents of the document itself, where true human tagged metadata doesn't exist. Mindbreeze will create snippets. I mentioned it'll create previews as well as thumbnails. We'll take a look at that during the demonstration. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, and this is particularly cool, especially if you're coming from a Google search appliance. Google didn't really have anything like this. Mindbreeze has what's called the Search App Designer, and that allows you to create, using a WYSIWYG editor, easily customize use case-driven search apps that you can then embed into websites, intranets, web center content, and other places. So we'll take a little bit deeper look at that as I jump into the demo shortly. The last thing I wanted to mention as we talk about search that works is doing all these good things. We're interpreting the queries, we're ordering results, we're displaying them up in a rich, helpful user experience. But how do we actually know if that's working? And one of the ways we can know is through analytics. And Mindbreeze ships out of the box with a very powerful analytics platform called AppTelemetry, which allows you to see all the logs, all the queries that have been performed. It comes with a number of dashboards that are out of the box. You can also create your own dashboards to be able to see, what are people searching on, what are they searching on where they're not finding results, because a lot of times that's a really good indication that maybe you need to create a new synonym, maybe you need to create new content because your users are hungry for that content and it doesn't exist. It gives you a lot more insight about whether search is actually working. The other way that we can see that is through feedback. And Mindbreeze ships with a built-in feedback mechanism, so users can fill out this feedback form from the search results, and I'll show you this in the demo as well. And then that shows up within this AppTelemetry framework, where I can see my inbox, all the feedback that has been submitted. I can also get emails to tell me when new feedback has been submitted, and it'll show me, what the user said. It'll give me an actual screenshot of their search UI at the time that they submitted the feedback. And if I open this up, I can see it larger within the AppTelemetry view. So that makes it really easy to have a much better idea of if search is actually working. So if we bring that back to our first list of 3 things, what is search that works? How does Mindbreeze stack up? So understanding user intent, Mindbreeze has search suggestions as well as very flexible and robust query expansion, which I talked about, that helps it to really understand the full breadth of what is the user looking for when they type query in the query box. The second thing is ranking results. So Mindbreeze has a multifaceted, sophisticated relevancy algorithm that uses a number of document signals as well as machine learning to properly rank documents and show you relevant information on page 1. Then they also allow you to tweak and boost that for your own requirements through a number of easy-to-use tools. And then lastly, how do we display these back up to the user? Mindbreeze is going to provide out-of-the-box previews, thumbnails, the ability to have filters, and contextual actions, which all make it really easy for users to interact with the search results. So let's take a look at how this actually works inside of WebCenter. So what you're seeing here is WebCenter content integrated with Mindbreeze InSpire. And this UI is made possible through Fishbowl connector. So when I integrate Mindbreeze, I can have Mindbreeze search right inside WebCenter content. There's a few things I want to point out here. So I did a search for IT policies. And what you'll notice is, first of all, like I said, Mindbreeze understands different kind of user intent, and it automatically will do query expansion to be able to know that IT means information technology, policy, and policies, they're the same word, they're just different forms of the same word. So it's going to find all these different documents. They're called policy, information technology policy, even though I searched for IT policies. Secondly, you're going to get these thumbnails generated by Mindbreeze to provide a little bit more context for the search UI. You're able to filter your search results based on metadata. This is all configurable, which fields you want to use. In the case of WebCenter, I'm filtering on DDoc author, content type, date. I also have the option to filter based on data source. So I mentioned that this webinar is focused specifically on integrating Mindbreeze with WebCenter content. But you can also integrate with a number of different data sources, and you can not only do that in Mindbreeze itself, but you can then surface that up through WebCenter content. So I can be searching all these different data sources from one place inside of WebCenter. The last thing I want to point out here is that all of these actions are contextual. So this document is coming from WebCenter content. So I'm able to see actions related to WebCenter, such as checkout, get native file, send it link by email, and so on. These previews are generated by Mindbreeze, so I can see those across data sources. And if I click on the preview here, it'll open up a PDF. Mindbreeze will create these PDFs for Word documents, Excel files, PowerPoints. It'll also apply this markup to existing PDF files. So you can see right here in the page all the places that the terms that you search for appear within the document itself. The other thing I wanted to mention on this interface is that you can provide feedback. So this is the feedback I mentioned a little bit ago. I can click here. Again, it's going to pop up this feedback mechanism where a user can submit feedback to the administrators if they can't find something or something doesn't appear to be working right. So it provides you a good way to be able to monitor the search experience and make improvements as needed. So what you're seeing here is really kind of the out-of-the-box Mindbreeze UI with a CSS file applied to it, which allows it to look and feel more like more like WebCenter content. So this is very out of the box, easy to set this up. I also wanted to mention that this is also mobile responsive. So if I pull this up on a phone, you can see that it's going to automatically adjust to the form factor of the phone. So all of the search apps that come with Mindbreeze use Bootstrap. They're mobile responsive. You can see, WebCenter content out of the box isn't particularly great at being rendered on mobile devices, but the search UI itself will properly adjust for a good search experience from tablets and phones. So now that we looked at Mindbreeze inside of WebCenter and some of the out-of-the-box UI, I also wanted to take a look at how we build search apps. So I'm going to switch over here. This is the Mindbreeze Management Center. All of the administration for Mindbreeze can be performed through a web UI. And one of the things that you can do is create search apps. That's what we're going to look at today. You can go to search apps and create a new search app. So I'm going to create an example for policy search. So if we want to create a policy browser, we can create that UI as a search app inside of Mindbreeze. So I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to create a new application. And then from here, I can go ahead and open this in the search app designer. So this is going to give me a blank search app. So I'm going to add a new element. The first thing I want to do is choose a layout. So the layout that I'm going to use is a sidebar with a main content area. So I'm going to add that. And then the next thing that I want to do is I want to pick results. I want some search results. So I'm going to choose the results section. And from here, you can see that Mindbreeze has a number of different out-of-the-box visualizations that you can use to control the look and feel of how the search results are presented. So I'm showing an example of a list. You can also have an image gallery. You can have tabular table view with metadata. You can display geodata as in the form of search results on a map or search results over time on a timeline. So it's very flexible in that way. I'm going to pick this list. And you see when I do that, I immediately can see a preview of documents in that list. I can also put constraints on my search apps. So if this is going to be a policy browser, then I can put a constraint on this search app that says I only want content with a DDoc type of policy. I have a number of other controls. I can set the order. This right here is the template that controls the rendering of each of these result items. And this uses the mustache templating language, which is a client-side JavaScript-based templating language. So for example, if I want to alter something about how these are presented, say add or remove different metadata, or in this case, I can see where it's rendering the icon. If I remove that, I can remove the icon and you'll notice it disappears. I can also use this to add different classes if I want to be able to target this in a specific way with CSS in order to adjust the look and feel of the search results. So I can do that here, and then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a filter. So we're going to go ahead and put a filter over here. I'm going to filter based on DDoc author. You can also notice there's a number of different configurations you can set for your filters, such as whether or not to expand the filter by default, whether it'll allow type ahead to restrict the list. You can also, if you scroll down, you can use the mustache templating language on any of the widgets in this UI, so I can further control and refine how this is presented. And then when I'm ready to use it, I can save. You see how quick, obviously this was a pretty simple example, creating a policy browser. I can save this UI, and once it's saved, then I can go back to my list of search apps, and I can export this snippet. So when I click on the export, it's going to give me everything I need to embed this search app into a website, an intranet, and in our case, into Oracle WebCenter content. So I'm going to show you how that's done. So as part of Fishbowl's productized integration with Mindbreeze and WebCenter, we provide a very easy way for you to drop this code snippet into WebCenter and surface up this search app. But like I said, you can also drop this into WebCenter portal. You could drop it into a Site Studio website or other places as well. So I'm going to go back over to WebCenter content, and you'll notice when I do that, I can go to Fishbowl Tools, Mindbreeze Administration. This is a menu item that gets added as part of our integration with Mindbreeze, and then I have the option to manage my search clients. So we took a look at one of the search clients already at the beginning of this walkthrough, and I'm going to add the one that we just created. So if I click Add New Search Client, I can come up here. I can create a name for my search client. We're going to call it Policy Search. I can give it, I can decide whether to include it in this Mindbreeze search menu that end users would see. So only admins are going to see this administration, but your users can see this menu if you expose it in that menu. And then I can paste in my snippet. So I've pasted this in just as I pulled it out of Mindbreeze. What I will do in a lot of cases is add right at the beginning another CSS file that has some styling, just to make it match look and feel of WebCenter content a little bit better. So that's what you saw in the first demo, the first example. What we're going to see now is purely out of the box. So I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to go up to my Mindbreeze search menu, and now I have a new search option, Policy Search. Click on that, and here's the search app that we created using the Search App Builder. So you can see that was very quick and easy to do. The other thing I wanted to mention is all of these search apps can also be searched from the quick search. So you can see them in the Mindbreeze search menu. You can also see them in the quick search. And in this case, when I search in the quick search, I also get the type ahead that comes from Mindbreeze. So anywhere you have search boxes in Mindbreeze, whether they're in the type ahead as part of the quick search in WebCenter, or whether you've embedded them directly into the body of your search app, Mindbreeze will provide search suggestions based on a number of different configured factors, such as recent queries, popular queries, document metadata, and you can see those right here in the search type ahead. The last thing I wanted to show is how we integrate this with WebCenter Portal. So integration with WebCenter Content and WebCenter Portal are quite similar. In this case, we're taking a look at the same search app that we used at the very beginning of the walkthrough. So this is, like I said, the out-of-the-box Mindbreeze search client without any customizations. The only thing I did was I added a CSS file, in this case, to make it match the look and feel of WebCenter Portal. So here's the WebCenter Portal instance. I've integrated this with WebCenter Portal using an HTML task flow and embedded that snippet to be able to have my search client appear in WebCenter Portal. So you'll notice when I search for IT policies here, this is the same example used at the beginning. I can see my search results show up, matching look and feel of my portal, but coming from Mindbreeze. So now that we looked at what that integration can look like, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we actually do that. What are the pieces that you need to do the integration? So there's really three things that you saw happening in the walkthrough. The first one was the Mindbreeze Enterprise Search Appliance. So the Mindbreeze appliance is what actually provides the unified index, the query expansion, all the different kinds of synonyms and stemming that I talked about, the type ahead. Mindbreeze also generates the previews and the thumbnails for the content from all the different data sources, provides that search app builder, and it also provides the analytics and the feedback mechanism. So all of that core search functionality that's provided by Mindbreeze. What Fishbowl does is we created a connector that allows Mindbreeze to index the content coming out of WebCenter. So there's a few different components of what we call the connector product. The first is the actual data source connector that provides the indexing not only of the content, but also of WebCenter metadata, as well as an ACL representation of the complete WebCenter content security model. So for those of you who have GSA currently and you're used to, you might be thinking of how you had a lot of different choices with the security and with the GSA as far as early binding and late binding, and it was a little bit complicated to set it all up. With Mindbreeze, it's much more simple. We were able to create a Mindbreeze ACL representation of the security groups and accounts and roles that people have, and feed that to the appliance so that without any tedious configuration, Mindbreeze is going to be able to determine who has access to what content from WebCenter. So the indexing is going to send those ACLs. The next piece of this product is the principal resolution cache, and that stores information that it uses to resolve the ACLs. So when someone does a search and Mindbreeze knows, well, this person is they're Kim, and she has access to the security group, and she's in these 4 different accounts. How does it know which content or which, how it's able to figure out who has access to those different groups and who can see that content? The principal cache is what does that. So that's another piece of the product from Fishbowl that we created, the integration between Mindbreeze and WebCenter. The third piece is the user authentication. So in order for Mindbreeze to be able to use the principal cache and the ACLs to figure out who has access to which content, it first needs to know who you are. And so we've created an authentication plugin for Mindbreeze, which allows WebCenter content to silently pass a user's identity to Mindbreeze so that Mindbreeze knows who is performing the search and then can invoke these different mechanisms to properly authorize access to content. The last piece is the UI side. So I showed in the walkthrough how we've made it easy to integrate the search apps into WebCenter content. So those are sort of the pieces that come from Fishbowl as part of the WebCenter content integration. The last piece is for customers who also have WebCenter Portal. So if you have WebCenter portal, most of the indexing side looks exactly the same for WebCenter content and WebCenter portal. So all of these first two bullets, those are going to stay the same. You're still going to index the content items themselves out of WebCenter content. You can use the principal resolution based on the security model within WebCenter content. Excuse me. And then you're going to use the specific authentication mechanism that we've created for WebCenter portal. And that's going to work similar to WebCenter content, only it's going to be invoked from WebCenter portal, and it's going to pass the portal user's identity from the portal to Mindbreeze, again, so that Mindbreeze is able to properly authorize access to the documents which have been indexed. The other thing I wanted to mention as far as portal goes, this isn't specifically part of Fishbowl's product, but as far as how you make the integration work, is that generally what we recommend is using a Mindbreeze search app, either the default search app that I showed first, or any of the custom search apps that you might create with a search app builder. Integrate that with WebCenter portal using an HTML task flow. The other option that you have for both portal and content, and really any other website or application that you might want to integrate with, is to create a custom search application using the Mindbreeze APIs. So Mindbreeze has a REST API that can return the search suggestions and the search results as JSON data, and then obviously you can take that response and create a completely custom user interface with that information. And you can do that in WebCenter portal or WebCenter content or inside of a website. So that is going to be a little bit more effort. We generally recommend you try to use the built-in search apps and search app builder if you can. But I also do think it's important to note that there is a rich REST API for Mindbreeze, and in some cases, that's the best option. And you can get a really customized, tightly integrated search experience by using that API. So what does an implementation look like? There's a couple of different ways we can do implementations, but two of the most common ways to get yourself off the ground with Mindbreeze is either through our Jumpstart or through a Try and Buy POC package. So the Jumpstart is specifically for customers who have WebCenter content. It's a 1-week program that includes both training for your administrators on how to manage and configure Mindbreeze, as well as hands-on time setting up and configuring the WebCenter content connector. We typically do this in dev during the Jumpstart, since it's the best practice to set everything up in dev first, but then also configuring Mindbreeze appliance for things like SSL, synonyms, document previews, configuring the authentication so that you can have secure search, so setting up the auth for WebCenter content, and then configuring serving generally inside of WebCenter content using a search app, but you can also serve this right off the appliance directly. The other option is to do a try and buy POC. So if you really want to, try out Mindbreeze before you commit fully to buying, the whole thing, you can do a try and buy package. There's a 28-day engagement that includes the appliance and the software. We also recommend this approach if you're looking at trying out more than one data source. So it includes updating up to 2 secure sources, which could be WebCenter content and SharePoint, or SharePoint file systems, and then up to 3 public sources, which might be crawling a website or an intranet or a blog, or would be something like that, as well as the same type of initial setup, setting up the appliance, configuring it for synonyms, document previews, setting up a UI, again, to either integrate with WebCenter content or WebCenter portal, or serve that off of the appliance directly. And then from there, our implementations run the spectrum from, some customers, we do the Jumpstart. That gives them, enough to understand how it works, and they're able to take the rest from there on their own. In other cases, we'll do a full-blown project where we will, create custom search UIs, push the configurations through multiple environments, support you through go live, and all of those good things. And then I did want to make a couple other comments for those of you I know who have Google Search Appliance or Secure Enterprise Search, both of which have been end-of-lifed, and you're looking at, how do I migrate from one of these to Mindbreeze? A couple things I wanted to comment on here. First of all, you would copy over your indexing configuration. So however whatever content you set up to be indexed by these tools with either GSA or SES, you'd copy that the same scope of indexing into Mindbreeze. And then because of how Mindbreeze is architected, how we've architected our integration, it does not override the integrations with SES or Google or just out of the box. Even if you just have WebCenter out of the box, we're not overriding the default search. So it allows you to run both simultaneously and test them and make sure that you have everything working the way that you want before you would, turn off GSA or turn off SES. We also recommend that you migrate synonyms. If you have search suggestions on either SES or GSA, we recommend that you export those. Mindbreeze actually has an easy way that you can load those in. So you can pre-configure a list of suggestions. That was something that you couldn't do with GSA, but you can do that very easily with Mindbreeze. So we recommend you carry those over. And I do just want to reiterate, Mindbreeze has done over 400 GSA replacements, so it's a very natural transition, and it's something that they're, that it's a very natural progression, and there's a lot of similarities that will be familiar for customers who are used to working with these other technologies that will help you get up and running really quickly. So I want to thank you all for joining and bearing with my fading voice here. I'm going to open it up for questions. And before I do, I also just wanted to say, I realize, in a short webcast, we're not able to get really deep on all the different topics, but I would be happy to set up a demonstration where we can go deeper on anything that you might be curious about. We can take a look at, the integration with WebCenter content or building search apps or managing Mindbreeze. And if that's something that you're interested in, feel free to just type demo in the chat box or the Q&A box, and someone from Fishbowl will be in contact in the next day or so to find a time that works for you to do that. So I'm going to open up for questions. I see I have a few in the chat box. So one of the questions is about the scope of indexing. So the question is, do you have to index everything that's in WebCenter content, or can you configure Mindbreeze to index only some of the content? And the answer to that is you can configure what you want to index. So using any metadata that you might have or any combination thereof, you can specify a where clause for which content should be indexed. So if you have only certain security groups that you want to index or certain content types, it's really easy within Mindbreeze to configure which content you want to use or you want to index with the Mindbreeze appliance. There's a question about, do all metadata fields have to be indexed? I'm not sure. I think there could be two ways I could take that question, and I guess I'll answer them both because they're both kind of relevant to WebCenter. So one question I think is asking about whether or not you have to set up metadata fields in WebCenter as indexed by the WebCenter search engine or optimized as optimized or indexed metadata fields. And the answer is no, you wouldn't have to configure them to be indexed in WebCenter in order to index them in Mindbreeze. The other question I think is related to that, I think is asking whether you have to index all metadata within Mindbreeze. So the answer to that is no. By default, it's going to index pretty much all of your metadata, but there's a configuration for which fields you want to include or not. So you can very easily say if there's certain ones that you do not want indexed, you can include those as part of that configuration, and they will not be indexed. So it is very configurable as far as which metadata that you want to have indexed. So there's a question about using Mindbreeze with WebCenter portal with the Site Studio assets via Content Presenter. So what we recommend with that is that you're going to index the content using the connector for WebCenter content, and then that will be and that will actually get indexed properly as content. But then when you serve up the results in the portal, you're obviously not going to want to link to the XML file. You're going to want to link to the search result in the portal context. And so typically what we do with that, and we actually have had the same kind of scenario come up a lot with GSA, so we've tackled this many times, is a lot of times on either as part of the indexing, we'll use a filter to override what gets indexed as the content item URL, destination URL. We'll either do that as a filter on the indexing side, or we'll do that on the client side using JavaScript. We've done it both ways in different scenarios, but basically, as long as your portal is structured in such a way that we can give it a predictable path to know where you actually want the user to go in the portal, then when someone clicks on the search result, we're taking them to the portal, to the proper context. We're not taking them to an XML file. There's a question about integration with the content UI from Oracle, and unfortunately, Oracle doesn't actually allow partners like us to extend that UI, so we would love to be able to put Mindbreeze search in the content UI, but that isn't something that Oracle provides a mechanism to do. On the WebCenter portal pages, however, we can integrate, and I think this question was from earlier in the webcast, so it might have been before I showed the integration with WebCenter portal, but like I said, you can do it a few different ways. You can integrate the search app, or you can write using the Mindbreeze API. You can natively write inside of WebCenter portal a search UI that will call Mindbreeze and then render the results in the portal. There's some questions about using HCST templates to render search results. I'd be happy to set up a follow-up meeting to talk about that a little bit more. I think that's probably not the way that we would recommend that you do it, although there's nothing intrinsically or technically prohibitive about, you could have an HCST template and you could call the Mindbreeze API and use Ajax to render that in a template. So it's not so much a technical limitation, but in most cases it wouldn't be the approach we would choose. We definitely would be happy to talk more detail about different options you have, because there are quite a few options with Mindbreeze to create a customized and reformatted look and feel for the search results. Yes, there's a question about will Mindbreeze index the content stored in a file system? Yes, it will index it whether you're using file store provider or whether you're storing it in a database. The connector is using the WebCenter content APIs to retrieve the content, so it doesn't really matter where the content is actually stored for the content server. And I think that's about all the questions that I have time for, and I know my voice is really fading here, so sorry about that. I think there's a couple other questions that we can follow up with after the fact. I really appreciate all of your time today. Thank you for joining. And if you had a question that we didn't get a chance to get to, myself or someone else from Fishbowl here will be in contact soon and make sure that we get all of your questions answered. And like I said, if you want to schedule a follow-up, we'd be happy to dive deeper into a demonstration. And you can simply email info@fishbowlsolutions.com to do that, or type demo in the chat box, and we'll follow up with you to do that. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining.